the Dolores Hertha Foundation with regard to Bakersfield. As Commissioner DeGiulio mentioned before, they would prefer to have a pre-map meeting earlier, but in lieu of them not having that, we may want to consider Bakersfield on this second go-round early. That's a high-growth area, 41% over the last 10 years. So let's not leave Bakersfield out if we possibly can avoid it.
Discussion.
We lost Bakersfield, because I think it was on the previous version, so I'm not sure what happened to it.
I think we put Hanford in as an option for the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley, particularly since it's related to the Section 5 in Kings County. And then again, I think the issue of a Fresno versus a Bakersfield, Bakersfield is just similar to the coast. You are blocked up. Of course, you can come over the mountains from the east or from the south, but that's a big barrier. I just think you have more of attendance of a pool if you're in Fresno.
We also, if I might add, lost Bakersfield when Q2 redid the map, and Bakersfield became a to be determined. So it could still be determined to be Bakersfield, but that's where it disappeared.
And just, I would note that having spent a fair amount of time in the Valley, Fresno and Bakersfield are not really seen as, substitutable, or whatever the word is. I think there's a big difference between saying, we're in Fresno and we're in Bakersfield. I think it captures two very different populations, and also urban, rural. Bakersfield's become very urban. And I think you miss some stuff there.
You're right.
So I don't think that they're the same. You can swap them out. I think it's a matter, this will be an issue for us as we go into those to be determined, because there are very good justifications for a lot of areas that we will have to make a choice at some point when we go back, because there will be some areas geographically that may be more isolated or have a legitimate claim, but we have to make some hard decisions. So that might not be for a little bit later. So where are we on this? Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Keeping in mind Commissioner Galamas-Malloy's point about Father's Day, I'd really hate for us to, I guess, waste an entire day on, a holiday where we're not going to get a lot of public input. So I think our first means by which we could fix this difficulty with this week, because I have other comments, but we need to make a decision whether we're going to hold a meeting on Father's Day and whether we really feel that it would be good for the public. I don't know. So I think once we make a decision on that, then we can work on a flow, because Commissioner Anchetta's correct. Culver City into Anaheim is okay, but then down to San Diego and back to San Bernardino is impractical. So we should probably decide Father's Day first.
Commissioner Forbes.
I think we're twisting too hard to accommodate Father's Day. I think we could if there weren't the San Bernardino meeting after it, but I don't see, you have to basically pick up 2 days, I think, and I think that's really hard. So I think we just, and frankly, just as a father, Father's Day, it's okay, but it's not like Mother's Day.
I want to do a time check. It's 11:30. We have, I think, from having talked to the different advisory committee leads, the one committee after this that has something substantive is legal. I think the others will move fairly quickly. So when we're finished with this conversation, I think we then need to go to brief public comment, because I think there will be public comment on this. And then lunch. So,
Madam Chair, we still have to talk about the format.
Oh yeah, no. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm trying to get us to move back our schedule and still incorporate a lunch period. So it looks to me like we won't be done with this conversation, with this discussion, or this item, however we want to call it, till at least 12:30. Is that correct? What do people think? 12:30?
I hope we get it done by then.
Can we finish this calendar discussion, including
The format.
the format, by 12:30? If not, then we'll break in the middle of this discussion and come back to it after lunch. I'm just,
I would consider maybe 15 minutes. We might be able to work out the next 2 weeks, do 15 minutes for public comment, then have our break, come back and deal with either legal or Commissioner Ontai's input hearing.
how long is your item? The logistics,
Well,
long?
our presentation itself is probably 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
But the discussion,
The discussion is,
all right. Let's finish June, go to public comment, go to lunch, come back. In the meantime, I'll sort of figure out whether, whether we hear first from legal and then go finish this part of the conversation, or whether we go all through the calendar. Okay? All right. So let's continue this, and let's try and wrap up in 15 minutes. Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
So Father's Day, does everybody agree that it would be okay to have a hearing on that day then?
It's okay with this, Father.
It's okay with you? Oh, father, I thought it was.
and to all the dads listening in, forgive us.
In that case, I did hear Commissioner Yao's suggestion about getting back to that area. But when you're looking at Region 4 and you're looking at the greater Los Angeles area, we have tremendous number of other options to really spread ourselves out. In other words, you're going back to the same area as Commissioner Raya had said, the San Gabriel Valley. And although it's a second look, I have to recognize that we're doing a pre-map in Riverside and a post-map in San Bernardino. Again, to me, I think you can move out of San Gabriel. In that regard, you can go further south and maybe ask staff to consider areas in the greater central area of Los Angeles, which includes Norwalk, La Mirada. Again, now here's Whittier. Again, that would be, we can take a look at Whittier. Again, we took them off the map before. But that puts you in central Los Angeles and pulls all the areas and gets you back out of the valley and considers that. So I would consider that if we keep Father's Day on there, then we're back into central LA. But we do, if that's the case, we need to look at mileage and flow. Culver City first might be okay. Then if we moved Friday into that central LA, Whittier area, then go to Santa Ana, Orange County area on Saturday, and then San Diego on Sunday. Again, just for flow and traffic.
Yeah.
Alternatively, moving San Bernardino going from Santa Ana to San Bernardino on Sunday, and then San Diego on Monday. That's a possibility, too, for flow.
Right. Commissioner Raya.
Excuse me, and going along with that, I would suggest to staff, there's a beautiful facility in Cerritos Performing Arts Center, that would have everything we would need if it could be made available.
Yes, Mr. Claypool.
Do you have a contact?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can see if I can find one.
I'll provide
for
you the contact.
Oh, okay, great.
Excellent.
If we're making that suggestion, I'd like to have the commission look at, if we're ending with San Diego with the flow, if you look at the next week, we start with Sacramento and work our way down, but then the 27th, we're back in Sacramento for a commission meeting. I would suggest maybe reversing that to the extent possible, that we start maybe in Oxnard, Santa Paula on the 22nd, particularly if we're in San Diego, we just head straight back up to Oxnard, Santa Paula, and then reverse it with Fresno, San Jose. So you end, if we had suggested the 22nd, that Region 9 would be Sacramento, you'd end in Sacramento and go straight into your commission line drawing.
Okay, can you tick that off for us?
Okay. And there may be some adjustments based on weekday requirements, but let me just throw it out, just reverse it. The 22nd would be Oxnard, Santa Paula. The 23rd would be Fresno. The 24th would remain San Jose. The 25th would be San Francisco. And the 26th would be Sacramento. And that would lead us straight into our line drawing.
Okay, and then what do you have for the week before that?
I'm sorry, I was just going off the last proposal, and I didn't catch exactly, but I heard that it ended in San Diego.
And then for the 16th through the 9th through the 20th, what do we have?
I'll repeat it. if I wrote it down right. Culver City on the 16th, Cerrito/Whittier. We're wondering if Cerrito Performing Arts Center would be available on a Friday night. We were just chatting about that, so that might be a problem. So going back to, again, Central LA, Whittier. Then into Santa Ana on Sunday, or Saturday.
Saturday.
Excuse me. Then Sunday is...
San Diego?
No, San Bernardino, and then San Diego.
That's
Okay.
fine. That's
Is that right? Okay.
Okay. Do you have that, Mr. Claypool?
We do.
Okay. All right.
The San Diego one would have to be in the evening now. Make sure it's in the evening.
Okay. Any more comments on the June calendar? I'll give time.
The only
Yeah, go ahead.
The only other question I had is, where is the summary, or does this even matter now? I guess, because does the line drawer need any more time, like we provided
right.
before the first release of the maps when they were doing those summaries? Now that we're post the first draft, did your line drawer give you any suggestions as to what would need to be done, let's say at the end of the 26th? Because now I don't see that summary again on changes maybe that we're going to anticipate from the 16th to the 26th, number one. Number two, does a line drawer require a few days, and then we come back here on the 29th, 30th? I don't see any gap like we saw earlier.
Right.
Good point. We should
Okay.
ask them.
Commissioner Yao.
Does it?
Is it on this point? Because I think this is an important point we need to clear up. If it's not, let me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and.
Yeah. So
Should we recommend that we could have staff work with that premise and then come back after they've talked with Q2 about the other issue and this one too?
Right. What I would recommend is we've got the flow, we like the flow, and we can give them the flow, but as we did with the previous item, ask them what they need and tell us, because we've got the flow in the cities, and I think that's okay. It's more a question of what happens after we're done with the hearings, how much time. Okay? So I would, if staff can give them this changed schedule and ask them what they need as soon as we're finished with the last hearing on the 26th.
Great.
Okay? Commissioner Yao.
Let me read the flow again. Culver City, Cerritos, Santa Ana, San Bernardino, San Diego. Now, we can simply pick up Fresno and Oxnard, then the following block of activity, including Sacramento, San Diego, San Jose, and the series of Sacramento meetings can all happen in Northern California, as compared to having Sacramento on the 22nd, San Francisco, San Jose on the 23rd, 24th, and then have to drop back down to Fresno and Oxnard, and then come back up to Sacramento again for that last 4 meetings in June.
Okay, we already did that. So that was the flow that we're shifting, and then it's really a question of what's left afterwards. Okay? All right. Commissioner Antai, are you satisfied that we're done with June, and Commissioner DiGiulio, and that's as far as we need to get on the dates and the cities so far in terms of approving it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you, it's 11:45. What I would recommend is that we do public comment now on this portion, and then, like I said, we will come back and deal with the issue of formatting, and then go to Legal Advisory Committee. Is that yes? All right. Is there any public comment on this issue?
Good morning again, Jim Wright. I'm missing something here. My concept of your input meetings, I want to confirm that it agrees with your concept of an input meeting. what I'm thinking of is that you're listening intently, politely, that you're making notes, that you're asking questions, but you are not making decisions. So in the red meetings, red days, and the gray days, you're listening, basically. When you get to the green meetings, you're starting to review the information you've collected, discuss it, and decide what to do, and then inform the line drawer what they need to take, what action they need to take. The line drawer is there during the red meetings and the gray meetings, red days and gray days, helping you collect information to validate that you've got good information. But they don't do anything until you tell them what to do in the green meetings. I hope that agrees with your concept of the two meetings. A couple of things are, I think, very important about the input meetings is that you specify a time period for the meeting. And I think you need to stay in session for that entire time period on the basis that somebody might walk in 5 minutes before it's over. Okay? You're probably going to have to allow yourselves time beyond the scheduled time because it might go over. You've got to listen to everybody that shows up. And the other thing is that if you're in San Diego and somebody comes down from Reading and wants to give you input, you really ought to listen to them. They made the effort, and that's fairly important. I did notice when I was looking at some of the census data that's coming in that Riverside County in particular is one that has grown substantially, 41% growth in the last 10 years. I suspect there's going to be a lot of turmoil there, a lot of suggestions as to what needs to happen because that county's now going to have to get split, where in a much different way than it was split before. That should be very interesting. Thank you. Let's go to lunch.
So we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. Oh, more public comment. Excuse me.
Yeah, hi, sorry, Dave Sullivan again. I'll make this really quick. The Northern California statewide meeting, my assumption from hearing you, but it's gotten a little confused, is that will have equal weight with the Northridge public meetings. Okay, and so I guess it'll go on the calendar as a green meeting also, where you're going to be directing the line drawer. Is my understanding correct? And I just wanted to make sure that the Northern California kind of got the same kind of weight that you guys give to Southern California. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Hearing none. We will reconvene.
I think, Andre. Okay.
You sure? No, go ahead.
I don't want to reopen a can of worms here, but I'll just say this, and we can
go ahead. This is important.
But on the 21st of June, since we're on a roll, that day is open. We're in San Diego on the 20th. I'd like to have Oxnard on the 21st and Bakersfield on the 22nd and Fresno on the 23rd, just to have At no time do we go to Bakersfield. And I just don't feel comfortable leaving that area out. That's my suggestion.
This is, let's discuss this. I think, you raise a good point. You have a way to do it. I don't think anybody wants to exclude Bakersfield. So I urge that if there's a way to do it, that we do it.
Yeah, and we can talk about this afterwards, but again, I think what happened was the July 8th through 12th block, which had a number of cities built in, including, I think, Bakersfield, went to be determined. So, and we should decide, well, is that appropriate as a block? It is much later, and is that appropriate, because that's post-second draft map, but that's where they were. And again, it's a good point, maybe they should come earlier, but there are some blocks left where we can fill in cities. So I think we should just, if we get to that today or after lunch, we can do that.
Commissioner DiGiulio.
Just for consideration, I think this is a legitimate issue, but on a I won't speak to the Bakersfield necessarily, but I'll speak to the logistics of the suggestion that to get from San Diego to Ventura Oxnard, Commissioner Aguirre can mention, it's going to be a good 3+ hour, 4. Yeah, I was going to say 4, but I was being conservative. It's not a short drive, and also if we're going 15 days straight. I was just wondering if we need a break at some point. For everyone and for our groupies who are following us on the road. But that's just my suggestion about the implications of that. I think the issue of Bakersfield is legitimate. It's just the implications of logistics.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Raya, thank you.
Just to throw something more into it, but if we really wanted to consider Bakersfield, and I would suggest thinking it over lunch, but we have 2 Section 5, that's 2 different counties though, right? Hanford, Merced.
Correct.
Okay, so there's no way to adjust that.
All right, so I think here would be my suggestion, we've tentatively agreed on this. Over lunch, people, take your calendar with you and see if you can figure out a creative way to include Bakersfield in the calendar. Yes, Commissioner DeGiulio.
Commissioner Forbes raised a very good point, and Bakersfield is in Kings, am I not correct?
No, Hearn.
Hearn County.
Oh, you're right, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
That would have been nice, but
You notice the 2 Central Valley representatives are like, where? We should know.
so please, especially those representatives, take a hard look at it. We'll all take a hard look at it, and we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's Group 1 on the Citizen Districting Commission. We're meeting at the Capitol Building, and we'll be completing the discussion that we commenced in the morning, which is the decision the discussion and hopeful decision to adopt our hearing schedule at least through June of this summer, which will take us through 2 sets of hearings that lead to the drawing of the lines. So we've gotten as far as the end of the month of June, and we're about to discuss actually the logistics of these meetings, time, transportation, et cetera. But before we do that, I have a request that I'd like to honor from Commissioner DeGiulio, that we just recap briefly, region by region, everything that's sold for round 1 and round 2, so that we have a sense of coverage and whether we're on task with our regional coverage. So do you want to go through that?
Sure. And I apologize, I just had to write this out, so I can't refer to anything. But what I had done is gone through those first 3 months and pulled out all the locations that we had designated to the best of my memory and notes. So I thought it might be, as Commissioner Blanco mentioned, I thought it might be helpful just to review the region locations that we've suggested to see if we've covered every basin. I think you might see there may be 1 or 2 duplications, but that could be okay, but just wanted to confirm that. So in Region 1, and I will go by region by phase. So Region 1, Phase 1, there are 2 meetings, Escondido/San Marcos and San Diego. For Phase 2, it's San Diego. So there are those 2 meetings in Phase 1, 1 meeting in Phase 2. In Region 2, during Phase 1, there are 2 meetings, 1 in Riverside and 1 in Palm Springs, Indio. In Phase 2, there is 1 meeting in San Bernardino. In Region 3, and this is as I have it written down, in Phase 1, the suggestion was Santa Ana, and Phase 2, the suggestion was Santa Ana. In Region 4, Phase 1, there's 5 to 6, depending on how we want to look at this. There is Long Beach, downtown LA, San Gabriel, San Fernando Valley, and the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, with Northridge technically being in there as well. So that's actually 6, if you look at it that way. And, I'm sorry, and then in Phase 2 of Region 4, it's the one that had, all the other regions have just one touch. In Phase 2, Region 4 has 2, and I have Culver City and Cerritos/Central LA. For Region 5, there's one meeting in Phase 1 at San Luis Obispo/Santa Maria, and one meeting in Phase 2, which is Oxnard, Santa Paula. In Region 6, Phase 1, you have 3 meetings, one in Hanford, Section 5, one in Merced, Section 5, and one in Stockton. In Phase 2, in Region 6, you have one in Fresno. In Region 7, there's one in Phase 1, Salinas, which is Section 5, and one in Phase 2, San Jose. In Region 8, there are 3 or 4, again, depending on how we want to count this, but it's Santa Rosa, Oakland, and San Jose, with the addition of Oakland as a suggestion for the Northern California community-based input. And in Phase 2, there's one in San Francisco. In Region 9, there are 3 scheduled for Phase 1. It'd be Redding, Yuba City, the last Section 5 county, and Rancho Cordova. And in Phase 2, there's one meeting in Sacramento. So I'm not sure. My only points of clarification, in addition to if I got that correct, was maybe Region 3 with 2 meetings. One, Santa Ana, is scheduled for both Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Precisely on that point, I think I misspoke on the Santa Ana week, June, the second one, because we did have it identified as Anaheim, Irvine, and I was there, again, my philosophy is still the same, with county being a wide range, just like Region 4 for LA. If we went further south into Irvine, that's where I would probably substitute that Santa Ana. Like I said, I think I misspoke.
That's fine.
Because we used Santa Ana previously in Phase 1, if we're going to do another Orange County, but certainly I'll defer to Commissioner Ward since that's his place as well. And then I do have a suggestion. Commissioner Aguirre, Raya, and I worked out Bakersfield for the week of the 20th, or at least we looked at it over lunch, and so we'd like to make that suggestion when the time is appropriate.
Okay, we'll take comments on the regions, Commissioner Ward, and then we'll go back to that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just the same comment as Jody was, or Commissioner Filkins-Weber was saying, with the second round being Anaheim, Irvine was kind of the idea. We had previously kind of discussed this, kicked it around with staff a few weeks ago, and we'd identified Fullerton as a potential site and had a facility worked out and things like that. So believing that Santa Ana would, being closer to Irvine and South County, would suffice with Oceanside and things like that on. So it seems like if we were to consider Fullerton, Anaheim, they're sister cities, bordering cities, would be a more appropriate venue for that round 2 site.
And this is on, correct me too, this would be June 18th is where we place this, correct, that Saturday? So the Fullerton/Anaheim area is what you're thinking, okay.
Rather than Santa Ana.
Right. I just staff want to make sure.
Any more? Yes, Commissioner Parvenu.
My only comment, and I guess I need clarification here, with this first round, Phase 1, in May, on May the 20th, we have Region 8, Rancho Cordova. Isn't Rancho Cordova a suburb of Sacramento? So what's the rationale for going to a suburb that we have to secure another location or venue as opposed to meeting in a larger city, Sacramento, for example? Or what? I don't understand. That's only like 5 minutes away, right? 10 minutes.
It actually has it's below the river, and it has a far greater diversity than Sacramento as a whole. So that was just the thought. And there's also a tremendous amount of growth in Rancho Cordova, although by say Riverside standards, it's not tremendous, but it's still a lot of growth for Sacramento.
Thank you for the clarification.
Also, just the big areas of growth in Sacramento County are in the Sacramento region of El Dorado County and Placer County, which are up toward the foothills, this is more toward the foothills.
Commissioner DeGiulio.
I do think this is a point that Commissioner Parvenu raises, and I know Commissioner Forbes has provided a little input that in Region 9, if you recall, Region 9 is basically the top third of California. And we're trying to balance, we have the 3 first meetings, which are Redding, then Yuba City, which is a Section 5, and then Rancho Cordova, which is kind of considered a suburb of Sacramento. And then Commissioner Forbes has mentioned Sacramento is a state's capital. It's important to be here to some degree. I mean, it is. But then leaves us one touch left in Phase 3. I guess the Commission has to make some determination as to where it wants to go one more time because it's so large. There's issues if we try to go to a real remote place, if it's really, if it'll have any impact, so to speak, in terms of there's just not much that can happen. We've had this discussion in terms of population and the logistics of going to some place that really is in the very top of California versus using these condensed areas in Region 9 that are more populous. So I think we have to look at Region 9 as to where, if to Sacramento and Rancho Cordova is very close because of the population base, it could be it's justified, but it also, the implications are that we're really not going to go any further than Redding.
Could I suggest on that we leave some of those decisions for round 3 till we see what happens with the drafts of the maps? I think my sense is that everybody's let us know that that's going to be information that's, when we see reactions and everything, that's going to help inform the last and final round. So I don't know that we need to make that decision right now.
I agree.
Okay.
It was just the implications of keeping Rancho Cordova and Sacramento on the map and improving it for Phase 1 and Phase 2 for now, which is what we're considering.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does. I mean, I'm flexible to go with what the Commission in general decides. It's just Folsom's even further. I've taken a light rail from Sacramento to Folsom. I was in Rancho. We went through Rancho Cordova, and it's like 10 minutes away. I'm just thinking in terms of cost, venue, and some of the other logistics. I can see whatever we decide. That's fine. It's just, I don't see the rationale there.
No, I mean, those are important points. I mean, we have the criteria that we're looking at, and if cost-wise and population and all of those, this doesn't make sense, then we should talk about it.
Well, I think that Rancho Cordova and Sacramento are going to make sense because they're close. I mean, they're easy to get to from here. I think the issue is going to be when we want to have one more meeting in Region 9, because every place else in Region 9 is hard to get to, whether it's Eureka or Ukiah or the smaller communities. And there is been a question of population issues. It really, to some degree, it's a little bit of show the flag kind of trip. But the population is really here in Sacramento, for Region 9.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. Commissioner Parvenu, your question is whether locating this meeting in Rancho Cordova, if it's really going to capture all of Sacramento, not just the residents of Rancho Cordova, whether it shouldn't be in Sacramento. Is that?
No?
No,
I'm thinking that we need enough here to have input meetings, at least somewhere, to invite the public to speak at one of our business/input meetings here in Sacramento to allow the residents of Rancho Cordova to attend these sessions here and not have the, I guess, take the extra effort to move to a satellite location that has probably less than 5,000, population of about 5,000 or so. And
Actually, Rancho Cordova has about 50,000. But I think the comment is well taken that, I mean, I understand the diversity issue of the Rancho Cordova, but that's not where I would have picked. If we're going to have one in the greater Sacramento area, that's not the place I would have picked. I would come directly to Sacramento.
Or Davis, perhaps, if we...
Well, but Sacramento will get Davis and Woodland as well as
Okay.
Auburn and Roseville, all the outlying areas.
So can both Commissioner DiGiulio and staff who went through the criteria and landed on Rancho Cordova, give us your thoughts about whether Sacramento itself wouldn't be a place for us, this regional hearing?
Well, I think the issue, we do have Sacramento on there. Commissioner Forbes would like to have Sacramento. It's a question of, do we get rid of Rancho? Well, it's kind of the chicken before the egg. The other option, as Mr. Claypool and I were saying, is Auburn, Placerville was on the calendar at one point, and that was moved back down to kind of capture more of Sacramento. Rancho Cordova was chosen as a location to capture Sacramento, not as... I understand Commissioner Forbes' passion that it be a Sacramento be listed, perspective that Sacramento be listed, but I do think there's an element that we have been meeting here very many times, and there's a lot of opportunity for input to some degree that maybe we should spread the wealth, so to speak. That's just...
Mr. Claypool, and then I'm going to make a comment. Yes.
Just a point of clarification. We had it in Auburn, and we moved it down to Rancho Cordova because there was a suggestion that Sacramento wasn't being serviced at all. And then in this round, we've added Sacramento, and so Auburn is the corridor in Placer County with probably the greatest amount of growth in the foothills going towards Tahoe. So that's why we had thought about Auburn. It could be switched back out to Auburn, and we would at least pick up an area that's further away that has that growth.
And I think the intention was that Rancho Cordova was Sacramento.
Okay.
I know there's a linguistics about that, but...
Okay, so we did add Sacramento per se, and we've got it, I think, on a good cycle and a good flow that we spent some time on. So it does seem to me that Rancho Cordova really was trying to capture Sacramento, and we've now added Sacramento per se, that we could switch this out for something further north, more rural, populations that hadn't captured up to now in this region. How does that, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And one last question, where would you like to place that in the Phase 1 meeting spot or Phase 2?
Wherever Cordova was.
Where Rancho Cordova?
Yeah.
No.
Phase 1.
Okay, so we're going to keep, so you'd like to have Auburn, Placerville, and Sacramento?
Not Auburn.
Well, but if you're taking out so would you like to move Rancho Cordova to where Sacramento was in Phase 2?
No.
I'm sorry.
We want to have an additional non-Sacramento site in Phase 1 that's in Region 8.
And is that to replace the meeting on May 20th? That's the Rancho Cordova.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think we are on the same page. But what you were doing, you were listing the full grouping of that region, and we were looking at the actual sequence for that week.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is swapping those out.
Mr. Claypool.
So I'm confused. So we are keeping Sacramento in Phase 2 because on the 9th, and you're asking that staff and working with the technical committee select a different site for the 19th of May in Region 9.
We actually have Sacramento in Phase 1 now on June, what's the June 1st?
I thought we said we were going to Oakland because it would be easier for Q2.
Okay. All right. So we don't have Sacramento in...
We do not have Sacramento for that line drawing.
We have the statewide here.
The state. I thought that we had made a decision the statewide in Northern California
That's
would
what
be
I was
Oakland.
talking about. That's what I meant to...
So we have, I see the issues. We have 3 options for 2 spots where we decide where we put them. So there are 3 options are Sacramento, Rancho Cordova, and Auburn, Placerville. So if we want to, I thought I had heard Commissioner Blanco say that it was Rancho Cordova and the Auburn, Placerville. One could be in one phase and one could be in the other? No, you don't?
No, I think I was suggesting, really listening to the comments, that we would not do Rancho Cordova.
So you do Sacramento?
We do Sacramento and we do Auburn,
okay.
Placerville.
Okay. And I think the only thing with Rancho Cordova was trying to capture some of the ethnic population in Rancho Cordova versus that in Sacramento. But that's fine.
My sense about that is that we should do really crackerjack publicity and get folks to turn out to Sacramento.
And do you have a preference as to Sacramento versus Auburn, Placerville in Phase 1 or Phase 2?
Mr. Claypool.
I would just suggest, if we're going to switch it out, Auburn in Phase 1, Sacramento in Phase 2.
Does that make sense? Yes?
Let me just make one suggestion. Rather than Auburn, I think Roseville has had a lot more growth than Auburn has. I mean, Auburn has probably fewer than 5,000 people. Roseville has over 100,000. Auburn is not big.
And when we're looking at Auburn, we're looking at really the 50 corridor, going out into the foothills.
But Auburn isn't up 50. Auburn's up 80.
I'm sorry, the 80-50 corridor going towards Lake Tahoe. So
there's two complete separate corridors.
I understand,
Okay.
but it still is the foothills. It's something that's going to the east of Sacramento where we're not going to go except for one.
Okay.
Right, that was the spirit of my suggestion. I mean, Roseville is still in some ways an outer suburb of Sacramento. I was trying to get us really into sort of a different geography by suggesting that area. Yes? Okay. All right. So, I want to hear the suggestion on on Bakersfield.
As requested, we took a look at this, and we're looking at June 22nd, Oxnard, June 23rd, Bakersfield, June 24th, Fresno, June 25th, San Jose, June 26th, San Francisco. And that takes you straight up from Oxnard right through the central part of California. I mean, Bakersfield, just location-wise, not geographic. Fresno, cutting over to San Jose, and then up to San Francisco.
So could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. June 22nd, Oxnard. June 23rd, Bakersfield. June 24th, Fresno. June 25th, San Jose. June 26th, San Francisco.
Commissioner Anchetta.
Yeah, I think that's a good order. I did have something specific to San Jose or that regions. Because I think what happened was that San Ramon was a Region 8, San Jose was a Region 7. So on Commissioner DiGiulio's list, I think it's listed under two different regions, but it's a Region 7 city, so San Jose. But I think you had San Jose under both 7 in Phase 2 and then 8 in Phase 1. Because we took out San Ramon, which was a Region 8 city, and put in San Jose in its place.
What should it be?
No, it's correct. You could just move San Jose up to, it's coming up twice in Region 7, is the point. If you're sticking by the region, using your chart that you've put together, or one you've written out, San Jose is in Region 7, not in Region 8. But the reason it might have been on your list is that San Ramon, we switched San Ramon and San Jose, and San Ramon was Region 8. Now, functionally, I don't think that's a problem because San Jose sort of straddles two worlds anyway, so Bay Area folks can go to San Jose, and that's fine. I do have a concern, though, when you're looking at Region 7, that, you're really going, that's more of it's San Jose South, so you could still use San Jose. You might look at southern San, this is a big area, too. It's like sort of like L.A. You could look at southern San Jose. You could go further south, maybe to Gilroy or Santa Cruz. There's a lot of ways you could go there, but I think you need to sort of move southward on the Phase 2 hearing somewhere. That'd be my suggestion.
I do like what this proposed with only one caveat is that if you put Oxnard on June 22nd, that was actually a placeholder for Region 9, so that means Region 9 does not have a touch in the second phase. Even though didn't have an actual designation, which is what Commissioner Forbes had mentioned, that would actually be where Sacramento is. I'm sorry, well, that's why we switched, right?
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Because, and we'll maybe need to hear from staff if they were able to reach Q2, but after the 26th, I had a little note here that we would consult with Q2 on how many days we need to push out. So I suspect if Q2 needs some days in between to capture this post-first draft map input, then we could probably consider Region 9 on Monday from San Francisco, because then you're still going straight up, right? Region 9 is Northern California. Mm-hmm. So you could consider that, and then we would have, 2 or 3 days before we come back. So we're pushing the green meeting and the business meeting probably, based on Q2's anticipated input, probably to like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if they need 2 or 3 days like they've told us before in between. So you could move back for Phase 2, Region 9 on Monday, and you'll still be in the flow of transportation.
So would you like to hold the spot for Region 9 because...
No.
For the 27th?
For the 27th, I'm just looking at it in the point of view where Region 5 doesn't have an actual designated day yet, so...
Well, yeah, Region 5 would be the 22nd, that's Oxford.
I'm Region 9.
Oh, Region 9 would then be the 27th.
So we should put that there for the 27th, okay.
Let's put a placeholder there for that, since we were going to clear those days, depending on what we hear from Q2. I think that's a great suggestion. Okay, before we move on, can somebody just, starting with the 16th through the 27th, read off the calendar?
June? Is that June?
From the 16th to the 27th.
June.
June.
Yes, June.
Okay. June 16th. Culver City, okay. I'm like, I've got arrows going all over the place. June 17th was Whittier/Cerritos, if Cerritos Performing Arts is not available. 18th is Fullerton. June 19th, San Bernardino. June 20th, San Diego. 21st, we're dark. 22nd, Oxnard. 23rd, Bakersfield. 24th, Fresno. 25th, San Jose. 26th, San Francisco. 27th, Region 9, wherever city that might be. More likely 28th, dark. 29th, dark. Maybe 30th, dark, depending on Q2's input, or that would be the first day of Sacramento business meeting, then Friday, then considering Friday, and then that's 4th of July weekend, isn't it? So, but moving into Saturday, or Friday, Saturday for the commission meeting, so just pushing it back.
So I think, Mr. Claypool, you have a quizzical look on your face.
Well, are we then not releasing a second set of draft maps, which would have been the first July 1st, in which the 27th through the 30th were all lead-ups to?
I would suspect you could still do it on Friday. What I'm thinking of is that Q2 still needs those 2 or 3 days again. Maybe 2 days here since we're already in Phase 2. So the 2 days for Q2 would be the 28th, 29th. Then we can come back together on the 30th to work, look at the maps. Or, no, I see what you mean. All right, where would our input be if we're planning to release on July 1st, right? But see, they still need those gaps. They still need those days. So
balancing the gap with
right? Can we still stick to? Let's stick with this. Let's stick to our plan that we communicate with Q2. That might really clarify this. Mm-hmm. One other thing before, and I guess this kind of slips into the logistics discussion. But one thing that numerous people have asked me to repeat is that we really think about these business meetings when we're drawing the lines, to really think about that they might take place in the Bay Area where the consultants are, rather than in Sacramento, to save costs. So I just want to, as we get into the logistics discussion, if we can keep that in mind. Okay, so take it away, Mr. Commissioner Antai.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the format first or the logistics?
Let's do format, since we've just done a lot of logistics, and maybe we could use another part of our brain for a few minutes.
Okay, let's take a breather. Switch from your creative side to your,
no, the other way.
The other
yeah, whatever.
Okay. The format, what actually happens at this input hearing? What's tentatively the scenario? Typically, if we use the San Diego and San Francisco model, what happened there, according to Karen, is that the chair at the time does a general introduction, welcomes everybody, introduces everybody on the dais, says some brief statements about what the commission is all about, what this hearing is about, sets out some guidelines and rules and the procedures and how this input will be conducted. And then the mapper is sitting somewhere ready and prepared to take in public testimony. So at this time, staff is lining up speakers and giving them handouts in advance. One of those handouts will be the toolkit, which instructs the public on exactly the type of information that needs to be presented. This toolkit will also be posted on the website as soon as possible so that the public knows what are the items that we would propose being presented to us. That piece needs to continue to be perfected. We need to get that on the website, however, as soon as possible because our input hearings are coming up very shortly. So Rob has prepared a toolkit, and I'm not sure if you've all received it, but I'd like for Rob to very briefly go through that.
First, I want to thank our partners, and specifically Redistricting California, for their great help in putting this together. They put a lot of time, a lot of hours. Kathy Fung with Common Cause and Redistricting California has just been an incredible resource, because when we reached out to these groups that have been living redistricting and the issue of redistricting for a very long time, knowing the ins and outs, they were incredible help. So this is a starting point as far as being able to, and not having our technical advisor in line drawing on board to bring the technical aspects to this. This is what we have so far. And as you look through this, it kind of sets up because we want to answer the questions, why should people care? What is this thing called redistricting? Why is it important to them? And then to talk about the commission and what the commission is about and the mandate. And then talking about, well, then setting up why they should care and and then how they can participate. We talk about the criteria that you're going to be considering. Talk about the Voting Rights Act and why it is important. And we presented this to two committees, the Public Information Advisory Committee and Outreach. And there are some additions that I'm working now with the partners on, talking a little bit more about why personally it's important about the Voting Rights Act, and also on communities of interest. In describing communities of interest, we're putting together sort of a mock, as it were, someone describing just a regular community so that they can see how someone else might describe a community to help. And then where can they get outside help, to kind of list some of the other areas, where you can go to draw maps and some of the redistricting centers and all of that. And then the commissioner, frequently asked questions, and then commissioner bios. So this is what we would like to be able to put up on the web, so that our first hearings have an ability to at least have something to really help them, and knowing that we are going to be adding more in the coming days, working with Q2, and then having this available in a printed form for certain groups and also for redistricting centers, but also having it on our website and also giving it to the outreach partners. And then when we're going into the public input hearings to those general areas, that we'll be working with groups on the ground there to get the toolkit out.
Now, I would think that we'll discuss this, but I would think that we need to have this posted as soon as possible because our hearings are coming up. However, it is still not a perfect document in that we need to get Q2's input on this, and I know that Commissioner Anchetta has indicated that he's particularly concerned about making sure the public provides the right type of information, legal-based information that we will need, and that, but we really can't do that until Q2 is on board with a contract. So we're in a dilemma here, a window of time where we can't really get that information until they're on board. But at the same time, we need to post this. So maybe Commissioner Anchetta, if you want to speak on that.
I can speak to some of those issues. I mean, and I think this is some action items that are further on in our agenda or will be proposed regarding delegation. But there are a couple of ways you can go. Obviously, we have a tough place right now because our consultant is not formally on. We can't just sort of say, hey, do the stuff without a contract, obviously. But we need to know in particular what we can guess, and maybe they'll tell us a little bit about what we actually need to put on paper so the public will not give us either incomplete or the wrong type of information for them to use and put into Maptitude. So, and again, there may be a process question in terms of how we're going to do this over the next week and a half that goes to maybe to delegated powers. But there are ways to look at it, which is you can delegate a fair amount to a team, which again, I'm hoping Q2 is on at least a week from now. I'm hoping that's the case, because if it's 2 weeks, we're in some trouble, because we'll have to simply act without Q2's direct input. We can try to work some stuff out now so that everybody on the commission feels comfortable. Generally what's in here, there's a lack of specificity on some things. And just, again, if the commission feels comfortable delegating some of that to, again, it could be a team of commissioners or Q2 once they're on board. Another way to do it, which I've discussed with Commissioner Ontai, is to maybe break it up so that the toolkit doesn't have too many details, but we may refer to some other document that would be available close to at least the Reading meeting that's a bit more specific, maybe a little more technical, but it gives enough guidance so there's an alignment between what the public gives and what Q2 needs. That's a possibility. I'm not suggesting that's the way to go.
Here's how
a number of ways to look at it. So anyway, but I think we have to be mindful of the fact that we don't have a full team and we don't have commission meetings in between to actually approve a final product as well. So there's a couple process issues over there.
I just suggest, that the way we proceed with the discussion right now is about what things commissioners, in categories or specifically, want to make sure are included in this kit that aren't in there now. Let's not get into I want it to read like this and say, just categories of things that you want to have in here. Let's have that discussion for a certain amount of time. And then, I would propose that even before we get into that we do make a decision about whether we can delegate then, given, once we've come up with the concepts that we want included in that toolkit, that we do some delegated authority. It could be the lead from outreach and the lead from technical meeting. In other words, let's figure out the delegation thing, because I do think we're going to need to do that in order to move quickly. It won't be the first time we've done it. We had to do it with some other issues when we didn't have time between meetings. So are people willing to proceed like that we go into categories that might be missing that we need to have in the toolkit, and then we have the conversation about how we make that happen between now and Reading? Commissioner DiGiulio.
I just want to make it, to impact this conversation, I would like to make the distinction here. There's two recommendations we're asking for. One is what Commissioner Ontai is discussing is the operational structure of the input hearing versus the technical structure of receiving public input. in relationship to the toolkit stands as a part of outreach. There will be a technical component added to that in terms of kind of providing this general framework to be of assistance, like a description of what will be happening. But the actual material, the worksheets for the public, how they will provide the data to us, and some of the other workups that we were going to discuss in terms of the technical. There is a distinction between these two. So when
That's
looking
really
at the
helpful.
toolkit, there will be a technical aspect, but you're looking at everything else that's been developed by the outreach committee so far.
I have Commissioner Dye, no, but Commissioner Dye and then Commissioner Filkins-Weber. Do I have Aguirre
Aguirre went first.
first?
You might. It depends on the comments of the previous two speakers.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I was just going to advocate for the lead discussion. We have some instructions or a document from Mr. Claypool that we could refer to.
Okay. I would like to wait till we finish this discussion that we just started before we switch over to the delegated authority. Let's finish the conversation about knowing now that we're talking about two different toolkits. What needs to go in there and by when?
Okay.
So we have Commissioner Dye, Commissioner Ward. Oh.
Yeah.
Dye, Filkins-Weber, Ward.
Okay, I just wanted to make a note that the Public Information Committee actually reviewed this document quite thoroughly last week and already gave Mr. Wilcox our feedback, which I understand has not been incorporated yet, but will be.
Right, and we're working with the partners to do that right now.
Thank you. Commissioner.
As I recall, when we were in Claremont and we were talking about educational materials, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Ms. McDonald say that she had like a toolkit that was ready to go if we were to consider those initial educational meetings? Because how I view this a little bit is, and we might be able to do it kind of two-phase, could this possibly be the outreach, document with reference to another, the technical aspect of the toolkit that we would get from Ms. McDonald. So if we approved this, and I'm wholly confident that Commissioner Dye and the Public Information Committee has probably thoroughly vetted this, but is that one way that we could go? Because then if we anticipate we're on schedule for the contract for Q2 to be, as I understand it, barring any other changes, like April 1st, that then she could give us, the 2 or 3 pages that she already says she has worked out as far as the worksheets, the technical aspect, that could just be referenced in here, but then that'll be like another section 2 of the toolkit. And we can probably approve that in Sacramento. It is, of course, going to be just a smidge, delay for Region 9 and Reading, but at least that might be one way to look at it. I kind of see that if we did it in 2 phases, 2 parts, I guess.
Yeah, reactions from the committees?
I think this leads to your point that, yes, we just don't have the information to review right now. So I think to separate that in terms of the toolkit, we also saw, to clarify, because this goes to the question of the lead, is that the outreach and in terms of the structure for the input hearings needs to be able to we need to recommend as a commission that the staff continue to work on it so they can have more details for us next meeting. We need to have the Commission's recommendation that for the technical side that we can work with Q2 to give us that information. And that's partly where a lead would be very helpful, I think, in this circumstance, so that there's some communication between outreach and staff as they're finalizing the details of outreach, and that there's some type of lead. I think this is discussion in how we're defining lead, but I should say, for lack of a better word, a point of contact with Q2 to be able to translate what we've been saying, not translate, but to transmit what we've been saying in terms of the development of the technical materials, so that we're a little bit further along. So when we come back right before our input hearings, we'll have a more refined document to review at that point.
Commissioner Dye, and then I'm
Just a point of clarification. I mean, the reason the Public Information Committee reviewed this is that this is going on the website, which is due to go live on March 31st. So it would be good to have some content for the website. So unless there's, objectionable material in this, I would recommend that we approve this as a first draft, and any tweaks, the website can be changed in a second, so that we treat it as a work in progress, and rather than waiting to approve some final perfect version, the day before we go to Reading.
And that is our action recommendation.
That's the action recommendation. Okay. Can I get a motion on that?
I move that we approve the document as a first draft, so that we can go ahead and put this toolkit up on the website, with the understanding that it will continue to be refined as our contracts with Q2 get finalized.
Second.
Can you read that back for us?
The motion is to approve the toolkit document as the first.
Public comment.
Hi, my name is Ronnie Woods, and I'm from the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, and I just had a comment on the toolkit. I was thinking it would be very helpful to have examples of testimony, not necessarily real testimony, but so that people have a framework to work from.
Thank you. All right. I think we can just.
I have a question, if this is a discussion. So at the time that this goes live, then, will we have the versions that are translated into the handful of languages that we had previously discussed?
We're working on that right now, to have it at least at first in Spanish, and then to have it in all the languages.
And also there's an automatic translation tool in Google, so we're looking into having that capability, so it can be translated to any language.
So let me just clarify then, is that option going to take the place of us ensuring the translation across the handful of languages we previously discussed, or that's in addition to?
Well, that's one of the things that we're looking at. We're also working with New America Media and their translators, and to make sure that whatever process that we use, that we have it where it's acceptable. And so we will start with having, the buttons on the website in those actual languages, and then having the first materials such as the toolkits and the press releases on the meetings.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, Google features automatic translation. It's extremely good for Romance languages. It's passable for Asian languages. But it's okay.
Anything more on this point? Yes, Commissioner
Just a
Chetta.
question, because it has been posted, right, in draft form. Well, that's where I got it a couple days ago.
Yes, it was in draft form when it was, when it was before the Public Information and Outreach Committee meetings last week. We posted
I'm
it.
just wondering what version is on the web now, and then what we're voting on would be posted.
It will be different. Yes, there are some changes, some additions that were made by the committees that we're working with on the partners, and then also where it says Commissioner bios, those will actually be Commissioner bios, and the thank yous will be filled in.
And in response to the public comment, one of the suggestions the Public Information Committee made was to provide examples of testimony. So,
and just
exactly,
to be clear, you might want to differentiate between what's now on the web and you can call it maybe the second draft. If this is first draft or committee draft, because we are trying to keep even past versions of documents, I think.
We're not going to post it as a document. It will be the website. It will be part of the website.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Which is why I wanted us to move forward on it.
That was a clarification I wanted, what the difference is between what's now and what's later. Okay.
All right. So, I'm sorry, we'll wait till the end of the session for more public comment. No, we're done. So, I know we have a lot more on the logistics. Do people want to take I know the Legal Advisory Committee has a recommendation on how to deal with the delegation of authority.
Don't we have a motion?
We have a motion on the floor.
I'm sorry, sorry. Motion on the floor. We won't do a roll call on this. We did do public comment. No? Oh, that was another motion. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Whew.
David Sullivan again. I want to squeak in one more public comment on the motion on the floor. Haven't had a chance really to read this document, but obviously it's pretty important insofar as what you're putting up on the website. I'm going to review it and make a written public comment later. One of the things that does concern me is that the groups that you guys have partnered with in order to create this document, Common Cause, I know of them by reputation a little bit. The other one, the Redistricting, whoever they were, don't know who these folks are, and I think that's very, very important. So I'll review this, and I'm going to make a written public comment later. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Got my motions mixed up. All right, so now we do have a motion on the floor. We've had public comment. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Now, my next comment was going to be if we need to do...
All the results.
Oh.
Unanimous.
Unanimously in favor of adopting this second draft of the toolkit that will be on our new revamped website on
March 31st.
March 31st, not April 1, March 31st.
Yeah,
Okay.
Not April Fool's Day.
Good, okay, all right.
Still need to finish up.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Okay, so that's how the public is going to be given guidelines using a toolkit for presenting their information. We expect commissioners to be active in asking questions that you think are critical for helping us to make the right decisions in the end. We're not mapping, we're not doing any decisions, we're asking questions. The mapper is coding and cataloging all of this information, and that's being done. Simultaneously, we do expect electronic messages coming in from the public. And so that's an issue that was discussed at the Outreach Committee and Tech Committee. And so when we look at that type of electronic information that is coming in, it could be someone from San Jose calling in a hearing in San Diego. It may be totally irrelevant, but that may happen. We may have callers coming in from Washington, D.C., giving their 2 cents, and that may happen. So the question is, what type of information that's coming in electronically should the Commission accept for that hearing, and what other information we should either discard or archive? So I open that for discussion.
Discussion?
Do you want to summarize the recommendations from the Outreach Technical Committee on that? We did provide a recommendation.
We did.
We have a recommendation.
Our recommendation is that we only catalog and record information that is relevant to that region's discussion and archive everything else.
Could I add to that just slightly for a little more information? There was some discussion about, there was some, we kind of broke it down into 3 levels of types of electronic options to deal with electronically submitted input, and/or there's been some, the first one would be a very high intensity. There was some suggestions from community groups that you almost have, for lack of a better word, a Skype option, where in the public input hearings you could have an option for people to be on Skype and interact. You could ask them questions. But we had decided as a advisory committee that was not possible, feasible, partly for the technical side of it, the staff intensity, plus it wasn't giving due diligence to the people who were there, and there's no way to confirm that someone who was calling in wasn't sitting in their living room in North Dakota. So the other option was to accept electronically submitted input and read it aloud in the meeting, which again says it would take the amount of time, the amount of effort. We just didn't think that was feasible. The third option, which is the one we've recommended, was to do due diligence and accept all that electronically submitted public input, and to be able to catalog it, staff would catalog it and give it to our consultants, who would then roll that up with all the other input from that hearing. So it would be able to be considered, but it wouldn't be read aloud or otherwise interacted during the meeting.
And before we go any further, can I ask Dan to recapitulate what we did decide?
That is, in a point of clarification, a term archive versus all the information that we receive electronically is going to be posted. So everything's going to be available. The only thing we're going to do is to take work through that information and make sure that those emails that were germane to that region when you were taking your testimony are rolled up into that testimony. So we wouldn't, everything would be available to the public, but we would be selecting out the portion that needs to be with that region.
And the mapper would need that information to summarize that regional report.
Commissioner Filkensweber.
Appreciate your recommendations. Given that quite a number of people will probably travel great distances to attend public hearings because some people feel that there is a difference, actually presenting information, I would like to give due consideration to those people who've actually come to the hearing and recommend against reading anything. If we do get it, and if it's possible, what we could do is just acknowledge a list, maybe, of electronic submissions, maybe at the end of the input hearing to say, okay, this will confirm we've received, unless we want to cut it off at a number. I mean, if you've gotten 25, electronic submissions in one input hearing, we could probably just run through the list quickly. People realize we did receive it without having to read anything. So we receive a public comment from Joe Smith from Monterey or, things like that. That might be an alternative so that people confirm that we've received it, that's what's going to be archived without having to read the whole thing and taking away from the people who've actually physically drove to the meeting.
I think the only issue with that, and we did consider that to some degree, but this is why we wanted to establish a recommendation to establish a policy, because if we said, okay, we will allow some type of acknowledgement, a reference to public input, if that was a kind of a door we opened, we could get flooded. If people thought that, we're not talking 25 emails, it could be a couple hundred in some places. If they know it's an option for their name or their recognition at the meeting, so it was the acknowledgement that their input submitted electronically was very important to the process and would be included. But we were trying to recommend a policy that would narrow the scope so that we don't have the possibility of being overloaded at that meeting, to be respectful for those who are there and the Commission's time and staff's time.
Mr. Claypool.
Just as a possible measure that we could go for acknowledging those individuals, we could have staff take those emails that we're going to roll up with the region, and then tell people you're separated on our website where we post, and say these are the ones that went with the region. Your name should be in there, and so they can find it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And just for a reminder, the format for the report backs, that everything be about a recommendation.
So is that clear to staff on what we're going to do? Yes. Okay. All right. And then lastly, the chair at the time just thanks the crowd and concludes the meeting. It's as simple as that. Once that's all done. At the end of the meeting, after all the input from the public is completed, then the chair wraps up the hearing and thanks everybody.
Okay, Commissioner Dye, Commissioner Filkensweber, Commissioner Aguirre.
I just had a question. Since we can't prevent people from making comments about other regions, are we going to be capturing that input, and would it just be cataloged for a different region, but it would be captured? I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and so the mapper, I think, will take that information. If it has, let's say a caller calls in from San Jose to San Diego, but the comments are more relevant to San Jose, then the mapper will take that into consideration for San Jose.
Commissioner Filkensweber?
In looking at your outline in the recommendation from your committee you went through a brief introduction, you discussed, I guess, the availability of toolkit to the public that's coming in the door, and then, I guess, commencement of the input process, commissioners to ask question, and then we dealt with the simultaneous electronic submission issue. One question is this: did your committee discuss some of the previous recommendations by this commission about setting aside maybe a half an hour or an hour for education with the use of the toolkit, because what it sounds like here, and again, this was that balance, we've taken out these educational workshops that would be sponsored by the commission, and in lieu of doing that, we did discuss the possibility of setting aside a half an hour or an hour for education before these input hearings, because you are going to have potentially somebody who's deeply involved in following us, bringing along, hopefully, 5 of their friends who don't know anything about this, and they want to sit there and they would love to hear from us. So did the commission consider that in your format for the input hearings?
First of all, we have to do that. I absolutely have to do that. But I was assuming that's going to be part of the toolkit, and we could pull that out and have that as a standalone piece.
Mr. Claypool.
If that were the case, then who does the committee recommend that would be doing the education? Would that be Q2? Would that be a staff member? Would that be a commission member? Have you discussed that?
Dan, what do you think?
I don't think we can do that. When we lost CCP, we lost the ability to have a separate person for that function. We'll have enough staff people there for someone, probably myself, to work with people as to where the toolkit is and where they might find things in there. And as we go along, the person who's making sure that that table stays stocked and so forth and that people know where things are might even be helpful enough to say, these are some examples. But beyond that, we don't have enough staff to do anything other than to direct people to our website or direct them to the toolkit.
Now, what Q2 did, they did exactly that, by the way, in San Diego and San Francisco. They actually had a two-part phase. The first phase that they went throughout the communities in San Diego, essentially doing the educational piece alone, telling the communities and the neighborhoods what redistricting is all about, what the issues are, how to go about providing the right information. Then the second phase itself was the input hearing, which was all centrally done at City Hall. And so the public had some educational outreach information in advance. We don't have that luxury, so we're going to have to build that into our input hearings. So I think one solution may be to ask Q2 to provide that at our input hearings as part of their opening services.
I was just going to build on what Commissioner Ante said in our discussions, in our just kind of consulting with Q2. Commissioner Ante had asked Karen and Anna Henderson to give some background. But yes, it is their intention to have an educational overview at every meeting, both in terms of a brief summary of what's going on, because I think people can get a little supplement with this toolkit, but to also provide some technical guidance as well. But I do think that there is an issue that, so to answer your question, yes, there will be an educational component at the beginning of each meeting. The bigger issue is that everyone who comes is not going to be at the beginning of the meeting. So there was some suggestion about having a videotaping one of hers or one of Q2's presentations at the beginning, or somehow having a small separate video that you could have in the back of the room and also run as a way to give additional, as people come in, they could watch a short video to understand the material that's in front of them, because not everyone's going to be at the beginning. So it was a way to acknowledge the need for some educational component and to explain what's on the table when they walk in.
Commissioner Filkensweber.
The commission has to approve that any plan of their educational overview before it's presented as our educational material at the intro. And so in looking at the calendar and consideration of when we will have a contract in place, I guess we just have to queue it up to talk to them about what that's going to be so that we can consider approval of that for the 7th and the 8th. Right. Just as a recommendation of commission for the technical or outreach committee to consider that.
That would be our recommendation.
All right. Do we need to vote on that? I don't think so. Okay. Commissioner Raya.
I just had a question about the video that we did yesterday. Is that I know at some point we talked about that being an introductory part of the hearing. So is that still, I guess when we see how we all came out on it. Who knows what the results are, yeah.
It'd do a great job of setting the table for, again, in Commissioner Filkins-Weber's example of people that show up to the meeting not really knowing what it's about or how to participate. Be a good job of setting the table, but certainly there's no technical data on that and nothing that would tell them how best to provide testimony that's useful for the mappers. So we would need additional.
How long is that video going to be?
Approximately 3.5 minutes.
Great way to open the meeting. Just my suggestion.
Yeah.
And then move forward with the Q2 tech stuff.
I have Commissioner Yao, who's been waiting for a while.
It's been said. Thank you.
I just want to make sure, Dan, that when you finalize a contract with Q2, that this piece is in there, the educational piece, because it wasn't clearly defined.
Well, it will be whatever was in the statement of work, and I don't believe we had that in the statement of work. The contract that we will sign with them, it will be what we agreed that they would provide us when they bid, and there was nothing in the bid for educational outreach. Their bid was for line drawing. So that's why I wanted to make the point that we're not staffed for it. It was always, I'm going to go back to it again, it was always assumed that CCP would pick up this portion of it for the educational component of it, and so it's not, I'll look again, but I don't believe it's in there for Q2. They're strictly line drawers.
Commissioner Dye.
So I have a couple of things. One is that video will be on our homepage. All this information is going to be on our website, and I think we're kind of overthinking this. This is not that complicated. I mean, I think a lot of this will be accomplished by having some good examples on how to give testimony, which we plan to have on the website. So, you know, it might be as simple as directing people to the video and the information on the website.
I have Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Raya, and then I really urge us to move on, please.
I'll defer.
The only suggestion I'm going to make is that when we do put these materials together from the toolkit, that we pull out that page that says, how do I talk about a community of interest, and so that that's highlighted, because that's a lot of information for people to go through.
I think that's great. Okay. Before we move on, I know there's an outstanding issue on this, which...
There's one more issue that's left over from, I apologize, from technical and outreach.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Just to, again, I want to clarify that it's okay if the commission will agree for the recommendation. Commissioner Antai discussed the calendar, the operational structure of the input, and I understand the direction to give to staff to continue to work on these elements. We're also asking the technical advisory committee is asking the commission's approval for a recommendation that we continue to work with Q2 in developing these materials.
That's what I was about to get to.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were moving on to the next one. I apologize.
No. So the one outstanding issue on this is the issue of delegation of authority to allow the technical and the outreach team to work with Q2 to finalize some of these details. Is that correct?
Commissioner Antai, correct me if I'm wrong.
There's the toolkit?
Yeah, basically there's going to be overlap. We see kind of the structure, the toolkit aspect. There's a technology aspect to it, but maybe this is a semantics.
Well, there certainly is the Q2 and the issues that Commissioner Ancheta had brought out, and so that has to be finessed. And then the technical piece that we're talking about, I think, ties into the same issues that Commissioner Ancheta is talking about. So I'm not quite sure. It could be semantics. But the issue is we need to get that resolved, and the best solution might be some delegated authority.
Does that address your concern?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Commissioner Dye.
We have not discussed time of day of these meetings. Which is kind of a big item.
Yes.
Yeah.
We very briefly decided to let staff to work with Q2 on working out the daytime events and the nighttime events. Q2 has recommended from their experience that the best times for weekends are 2 to 5 p.m. So that's kind of generally what we're looking at. On the weekdays, it's 5 to 8 p.m. Now, with one contingent that sometimes these meetings may go on and on and on.
All right. Commissioner Filkins-Weber?
I had an opportunity of participating with the Greenlining Institute at their first educational workshop, which I think was like their second or third that they have done. And one thing that was clearly evident was that 5 o'clock was too early. They had nearly 3/4 of the people come in at 5:30. So you have to think about logistics of people. For the most part, if we are considering the weekdays, there will be a number of people that do the 9 to 5 bit, and they will not be able to get there by 5 o'clock.
I think the recommendation for times from Karen was there's a difference between Northern California and Southern California. That Northern California would be a 5 to 8, and Southern California would be 5:30 to 8:30, and weekends would be 2 to 5. Is that correct?
Around
Commissioner
it might
Alcott?
even be 6 to 8, but it's going to be in that generic area.
Okay, so can we just instruct the committee in working with Q2 to make sure that they take into account, particularly in areas where there's long commutes, that we have to accommodate the fact that people will be getting off work and have to drive to the meetings, and really make sure that they think about that in designing the schedule for the weekday meetings. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The hours can be adjusted, a little bit here, a little bit there. It has to be site-specific. LA certainly, and San Diego certainly has different dynamics than, say, Northern California.
Okay. Commissioner Yao.
How much time we allow each speaker, is that topic going to be discussed later, or is this something that we need to decide? Is it a 5-minute, 3 minutes, or is it something that Commissioner and Chair recommended that the presenter give us information in writing and then just spend a minimum amount of oral presentation on what they want to give to us?
And that was specific to the statewide presentation, but it's a good question. I mean, certainly in terms of the individual speakers.
We didn't really discuss it.
Do we really want to spend time right now deciding how many minutes people should speak at each meeting? I mean, if people want to, let's do it.
We've got to set up the procedure.
let's do it.
And if we're discussing it now, if the public wishes to comment before we get to our next Sacramento meeting, I would suggest it. And just on that issue, I don't have any opinion, and maybe it might be a balance between the number of people that we have there. 3 minutes is a very short period of time. If we expanded it to 5, but then again, if you're talking about 25 people who wants to speak, or I don't know, but I'd be at 5 minutes, really. I'd be at 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
And then there's also
another
individuals versus organized presentations. I think we should set some limitations that are different.
And again, we may, what we're thinking about for the statewide groups maybe it's a good suggestion too, which is, if you're preparing to give us some testimony, just go ahead and write it all out. And if you bump up against a time limit, at least we'll have your written materials. Again, not that we wouldn't accept anybody without written materials, but I think that gives us something to work with. Because we might be dealing with a lot of people, and we might have to, just to get everybody in, might have to trim the times.
I think that's a great suggestion. So there's a suggestion that we have 5-minute limit on comments, but that everybody be urged to accompany their comments with written comments so that we can always take the written comments under advisement if for some reason they don't finish. That's just one first proposal. I have Commissioner DeGiulio, Commissioner Yao, Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Just
Commissioner Parvenu.
consideration, if we start these meetings and we get a group, an alliance that's coming together to speak for more than just themselves, do we want to increase that time limit beyond 5 minutes? Is there a threshold for how many people you're speaking for?
I have Commissioner Yao. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think it would be good for us to set up a maximum time so we can automatically default to it if we have a very large group of people that we want to speak before us. The chair always has the option to extend the time limits beyond the maximum that we set for ourselves. And And for community groups, they all have learned to basically share the same note and one speak after the other to extend beyond the 5 minutes in all cases. So, but I think it's probably good to have some kind of procedure going into the meeting as compared to trying to figure out what to do when we encounter the situation.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Does the Commission feel that they've satisfied some of the public comment from organizations such as MALDEF and I think some of the others? I think we received this maybe from the civic engagement that we did up here before. In other words, I do recall them saying that they wanted more time at these input hearings to make presentation. Do we feel that we've satisfied their interest because we're going to allow them to sign up on these regional meetings such that, because I can see a situation that we are going to have some groups that are focused in certain areas, for instance in Los Angeles, and those groups that are focused in that area for educational purposes, and they're doing a lot of their own input hearings. They've told us that at the civic engagement, so they may very well want to present to us when we're in that locale, even though it's not the designated region. So when we're considering this 5 minutes, I know that we're going to receive some public comment if we just limit this discussion to what we expect to be the average citizen that presents to us. But would there be an occasion, or would there be a process by which some of these larger groups that are doing input would come to these input hearings and be able to sign up for maybe 15 minutes? Or do we feel that we're satisfied that they're going to present their larger scale information on a regional basis?
I think Commissioner Yao had indicated that the chair would have some flexibility. So if you had an organized presentation such as MALDEF or NALEO, they may require 10 or 15 minutes, but that should be a request made upon the chair, and the chair should make that judgment.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, and I do have Mr. Parvenu and Ms. Commissioner Galambos-Malloy, is that we would set a time, and if people wanted to exceed it, if they wanted a waiver for that, they would ask the chair when they asked to speak? Is that what we're saying?
We'd have two separate, we'd have an individual time limit and a group time limit.
All right, I'm going to go back to the order because Commissioner Parvenu.
Yeah, I would like to encourage the partners who have organized maps and information to, at our input meetings, provide that input within the allocated time that we establish, 3, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and encourage them to return and give a more formalized presentation when we're at Northridge or wherever we're to meet, and then allow them the time necessary to give a full, comprehensive explanation of their maps or proposed maps. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd prefer to do. Secondly, at some point, I would like us to consider having a draft or a mock agenda for these meetings, something in writing. So far, we've mentioned the video, we've mentioned the toolkit. I would like to see a mock or a draft agenda before us.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea.
Great idea.
Commissioner Galambos-Malloy?
Yes, this is in regards to how much time to allow individuals, and this is kind of a philosophical question for me because I'm trying to balance the idea around having some level of flexibility to adapt to the conditions in any given hearing, and at the same time have consistency across the state in terms of what one person, one vote means, and not wanting to end up in a situation where it appears that an individual who lives in a heavily populated area where they're showing up to a meeting with hundreds of other people are somehow getting less of the commission's time or attention than someone who lives in a meeting where not that many people show up. And so I do, I'm open to hearing what other folks have to say, but I do feel that having a standard that's going to be the same standard is important given the underpinnings of how this commission's work was created.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Arroyo?
Yeah, I would echo that, 'cause my concern was when we were talking about giving groups with some title more time than individuals, and that I would have a deep concern about a different standard in that respect. But maybe we need to also at the same time keep encouraging people to submit information through the other means that are available, because we clearly are not going to be able to accommodate everyone at every location. Well, we'll accommodate them, but I mean, we're not going to be able to give them 10, 15 minutes.
Commissioner Ward and Commissioner Yao, and then I'm going to ask for sort of chair of the privilege. I know Commissioner Baraba needs to leave, and I want to make sure that, I think there is one thing we want to vote on, the delegation of authority, and I want to make sure we don't lose Commissioner before we do that.
I'll defer then, Chair.
I just want to answer Commissioner Filkins-Weber's concern. A group like, for example, the League of Women's Voters, they can have 3 speakers, and a chair can recognize to allow these 3 speakers to speak in succession, and they'll, in essence, control their agenda and get their 15 minutes in without us having to set up any special condition for them. And I think they all know how to do that. So the individual limitation really is just an attempt to set some kind of standard.
Okay, so where we're at is we believe we should have standardized time. We should not make differences between groups and individuals. Correct? That we should have a mock agenda so that we know what our script is, in a sense, when we get into the meetings. And that the toolkit and the video online may help to fulfill some of the educational aspects that we had to drop when we eliminated that portion of our work, the educational hearings. We haven't decided on a time. We just said uniform. Are we going to agree on 5 minutes? Commissioner DiGiulio. Are we ready to agree on a time limit? Yes? Yeah. Any suggestions? 5 minutes?
I would move that the procedure for this commission be at each input hearing that a member of the public be afforded 5 minutes up to 5 minutes for presentation of their information. That's it.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Let's read back the motion and then we'll have public comment.
The motion is that the commission's procedure that at each input hearing, each presenter would be allowed up to 5 minutes for their presentation.
Public comment?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to note that in these proceedings here, which are different because there's less time for public comment, you expressly reserve to the Commission the option to limit time to 3 minutes if there's a certain number of speakers. There should be more time for public comment at a public comment meeting, but in the event of a very large turnout, you might want to retain that discretion to shorten time.
All right, well, let's hear public comment on this.
Sorry, I didn't see you were here.
Yeah.
So I just had one question and one comment. One question was, I'm an Angelino, and if I came to a hearing in LA with 2 of my friends, would I then have would we have 15 minutes collectively to present? Okay. Then my second question, to your point.
Well, we're not allowed to really answer questions. This is really public comment.
You can, given that it's the motion on the floor.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Am I correct? If it's non-agendized items that are not up for discussion, we can't answer, but for clarification purposes,
okay.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. That was my first question. And then the second one, to the point made by Commissioner Galambos-Malloy, I think you would have an issue with people from Los Angeles particularly, because I think there'll be so many folks coming to the hearings, where if I came to a hearing in Los Angeles, my time might be cut down versus if I came to a hearing in some smaller city, and that wouldn't really be fair.
And so your suggestion would be?
My suggestion would be that you either have more hearings in areas that are highly populated, or probably just take into account looking at what happens in phase 1 to a pre-map phase to help get a sense of how you go about phase 2. Because today you've been really focused on making sure that you have a schedule, which is incredibly important for anyone that wants to present. But if you find that so many people present in big cities and you don't have enough space for the big city folks, then you're going to have an issue moving forward. So just to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Now, I do want to say one thing. Being a planning commissioner in San Diego, and I've been before many adversarial groups, if we limit each speaker 5 minutes, and that's the only rule we have. I've seen many occasions when organized groups will take advantage of that, and 20 people will show up, given 5 minutes each, all talking about the same issue. Does that make sense? So that is something we should consider.
Commissioner Baraba and Commissioner Wood.
I was under the impression that they were going to have a little screening at the beginning of this where people get a number. And could we somehow in that screening make sure that we're not, that we, whatever the subject is, there's one speaker for that point? Is that possible?
I don't know the degree to which we can question a person. We can't require them to give us their name, so I certainly don't believe we could require them to tell us what they were going to speak to us about or who they were with.
Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Anchetta.
This idea might have been taken off the table, but it seems like I recall in conversations with a CCP and technical experts from I think about a little over a month ago, was that they were talking about having paperwork available at the meeting for people to provide their input on and better qualify their input. So in other words, people come to the meeting with general concepts about their communities. There not only was the point to come to deliver that, but also to help refine it into usable information for us. So if in fact that capability is still going to be there, some form with a map, some whatever the case may be, something to record that testimony, to me, giving the chair the flexibility to be able to change times given the venue or even limit speakers, whatever the case may be, does seem appropriate because, again, this is not the only way a speaker can give that testimony. This isn't, if this was the only avenue, then those concerns seem to make a lot of sense. But being that this is one of many avenues with which to give that testimony to this commission for equal consideration with all the rest, whether we do 3 minutes or 5 minutes in a given city doesn't seem to be that impactful.
Commissioner Anchetta.
Well, I'm not going to speak to Commissioner Ward's point, but simply the point that, and I support the motion for 5 minutes, but just to be clear that, and it's not, I'm not sure if it's in the wording of, exactly in the wording, but I want to make sure that this is not the time limit that we're applying for those statewide meetings. That would be different. But just make sure that if the wording is fine, I think we understand that, and we wouldn't need a different motion on that, which could be now or later, but.
I called it input hearing.
Because I'm concerned that that term could be interpreted as every hearing. And I think the intent of the commission is not to apply to every hearing, but the statewide would be different, but.
Could you say regional hearings as opposed to the statewide hearing?
You could do a minor amendment, or again, we could have a second motion that would simply, we may not be prepared to discuss it yet, but I think everybody understands we would allocate more time for this, for submissions in the statewide hearing. I just want to make sure that we're not, by the wording of this motion, we're not precluding that change.
And do you have a comment on the 5 minutes?
Oh, I support the 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Raya had her.
I would just hope that in particular, organized representatives and members of the public who might be a little more prepared to, get a group together would give some consideration to the fact that there are other people, just individuals out there who are going to make that effort to come and may not have any other opportunity or means to tell us whatever it is important to them. So I think there's a responsibility not just on our part to try and structure the proceeding fairly, but also for members of the public to consider, that just the opportunity that should be provided to everyone.
And I know we have more public comment, but I think that that's something the chair would have to really work on, is having a good relationship in that hearing with the public, asking them to use their their courtesy and their common sense to make sure that everybody who's present gets a chance to speak. That we will have to, manage it well in terms of also appealing to the public that they, some degree of courtesy. Public comment?
I'd just like to say that I really hear Commissioner Antai's what he said about the San Diego hearings that he's been at and where groups take them over. So I would like to suggest if it's not possible to take people's names and have them, basically tell us who they are and what they're going to be speaking on, that the process be done randomly so that people don't speak in a in a row. Speakers 5 through 10 are all on one subject. Perhaps numbers can be taken, then it could be picked out of a hat. So that this gaming of the time frame cannot happen. I'd also like to say that I did think that the 15 minutes for the larger groups would be a process where the larger groups would then put up their best speaker and speak in a more organized fashion, and that I think would be much more helpful to the Commission than having 3 people in a row tag teaming like from the League of Women Voters. So if you just can consider some of these points, ways so that folks cannot game the system. Thank you.
Do we feel this okay, so we have a motion. Maybe you can just restate it.
And I just have one question.
So there's still discussion?
Well, just one other.
Okay, go ahead.
Given that it's my motion and I've heard the comment, we did have this issue before, and it's based on what Mr. Miller had said. Is everyone inclined to accept the 5 minutes as the motion stands, or should we give due consideration for obviously greater public participation when we have a larger number? I mean, we do want to balance the fairness as has been raised by Ronnie today, and but we have to understand that there are more populous areas, and we want to hear from more people. So I would entertain an amendment if the Commission is inclined to consider that over a certain number we would have to go down to 3 minutes. But Commissioner Galamos-Moy, I understand your point, but I don't want to lose that opportunity since we do recognize it's a possibility. So I could consider an amendment if the Commission was inclined to consider.
I would so move that amendment.
All right. Discussion on the amended motion.
Yeah. And is it a friendly amendment? So that
it is a friendly amendment that I would propose that the procedure of this Commission will be an allowance of presentation from the public at the regional input hearings in a time frame up to 5 minutes for presentation. At the chair's discretion, in the event of a large number of people, and I'll let the chair determine what that is, that the time frame for public input would be at 3 minutes.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Discussion. DeJulio's had her hand up. Commissioner Yao.
I understand the intentions of the amendment, and while I think it's been a good approach for us in our business meetings, I'm concerned if we do this in the public meeting that it goes back to what we've heard many times, that if you're in a populous area, you may be reduced to 3 minutes rather than 5. So your proportional representation, so to speak, is less than if you lived in another location. And then if you had the issue where if we're in the weekday, we might be willing to extend a couple hours for public input, but if you're on the weekend, you could technically extend for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours if you needed. So if you were in a big city on the weekend, you may have more opportunities to have 5 minutes than if you're in a big city on the weekday. I just think that because technically you could extend longer probably on the weekend if you start from 2 to 4, if you wanted to extend 3 or 4 hours versus maybe only 1 or 2 in the weeknight, unless we want to go till.
So you'd be voting against it?
So I would be voting against it because I just think proportionally, if you live in a place that has a higher, we could be overrun in Auburn, I don't know, but you could be.
It is left to the chair's discretion,
but please, and there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded, so please speak to so Commissioner Yao, Commissioner Forbes, Commissioner Ward, Commissioner DeJulio, Dye.
As far as procedures, I like to see us basically extend the length of the meeting to accommodate the people that are interested in speaking at the 5-minute speaking duration. And then if we exhaust that, then we perhaps need to limit it to 3 minutes as compared to just limiting it to 3 minutes automatically. So that's my comment.
Forbes.
Right, a variation is that I've seen this done, you'd have all the 3-minute speakers go first. and then you have another group of 5-minute speakers. So if you can say your piece in 3 minutes, you get to go first. You don't have to wait. And a variation on that is to say everybody gets to speak for 3 minutes, and once we get through everybody, we'll open it up again, and then you can talk longer. But that gets them. That means the people at the end don't have to wait forever. That they don't have 5 minutes to speak.
Commissioner Ward, and then Commissioner Dye, and then Commissioner Columbus-Malloy, and then DiGiulio.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Again, just the reason why I second the amendment and appreciate it is, again, just trying to understand why are we there? What's the point? Is to get the input. And we want to get as many people the opportunity to be heard in person as we can. But we have vehicles to capture that testimony regardless of whether it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes. We're going to get that data. That's what we're there to do. And I think if we take the flexibility away from the chair to be able to make a venue-specific decision on how we can best serve that community at that meeting, we're making a mistake. Because we don't know. We haven't even done one. We don't know. There might be facility issues. We can't just plan on extending hours on end to accommodate what shows up. There's facility issues. I'm sure there's a whole host of things that are yet to be decided. And so it just seems logical to say, hey, let's plan on 5 minutes, with the chair having the discretion to cut that down to 3 if needed, with the discretion if facilities allow to extend hours, whatever the case may be. But the point is, our goal, as I see it, is to get the input, and again, whether we're able to cut it to 3 because of the turnout, and then make sure that they have the opportunity to capture that in writing and provide that to them before they leave and things like that. It's all equal weight, whether they say it in person, we're going to, we care, we want to hear it, and that's what we're there to do. But to take that flexibility away from the chair, I think, is really a mistake, having not even gone out and seen what's waiting us.
I have 3 more, and I'm going to end this round. Commissioner Dye?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Ward. I also like Commissioner Forbes' idea of letting people use the 3 minutes up and then seeing who else has more to say. I think to Commissioner Ward's point, I think that, public hearings like this were designed in a different era. I think this time we may see a couple of orders of magnitude difference in the amount of input we're going to get via email and post it to the website. And so I think we need to not forget that that is a perhaps more important vehicle than the in-person public hearings that we're going to do.
Commissioner Columbus-Malloy?
So, I still think that consistency is what we need to strive for, and I understand, having been chair before and knowing that I will be chair at some point again, that I also appreciate that flexibility. So I'm just trying to do actually some rough calculations on what it would mean to operationalize this. So let's say we were at a hearing, and let's say we had 100 individuals turn out. If we were to give them 3 minutes each, we're talking 300 minutes. No, I'm sorry. So if we had 100 individuals at 3 minutes apiece, we're talking 300 minutes, which gets us at a 5-hour meeting. If we had the same 100 individuals show up and we gave them 5 minutes each, we're talking 500 minutes, which is 500. I'm sorry, I can't speak and do math at the same time, but we're talking about roughly an 8-hour meeting. So if we were going to make a decision on an absolute number, I would say let's err on the side of 3 minutes, because again, our goal is to hear from as many citizens in the state of California as possible, and I also would err on the side of consistency, so we are not privileging less populated meetings with people being able to influence us more than in more populated meetings.
So you'll be voting against the 5-minute motion?
I will.
All right. That's
Can I just...
And Commissioner DiGiulio.
And I just wanted to clarify as well, too, because that was the point I was trying to make earlier, is I would be voting against because I want the consistency as well, and I agree that 3 minutes. But I did want to address Commissioner Forbes that the first come, first serve, even though in concept it's a nice one. If you have 10 people, or let's say 20 people that are 3 minutes, then you're going to... and they spend the whole time, but yet someone's been there waiting for 5 minutes from the very beginning, and people continue to come in for 3 minutes. That person who's there right at the beginning who had 5 minutes is going to have to wait a very long time. So I think it should be a first come, first serve, and if we have to keep it consistent, so I would vote for 3 minutes. So I'd be against the 5 minutes.
I'm going to call the question. Can you please?
I'm sorry, I have 2 things. I didn't hear the second to the original motion. Did anybody second it?
The
Yes,
original.
I second the original motion, and
There was an amendment, the amended motion.
And then I just needed the last part of your motion. I got that the procedure would be at each regional input hearing, each presenter will have up to 5 minutes for their presentation, and at the chair's discretion, if the crowd warrants, time
Would be limited to 3 minutes.
Okay. Would be limited to 3 minutes. Do you want me to repeat that?
I think we're fine.
Okay.
So call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh.
Okay. 10 ayes. The motion passes.
Okay. All right.
Phew.
Phew.
Okay.
Thank you, Technical and Outreach Committee. I know everybody, how's the break? I'm sorry.
Chairman, we do have one thing in terms of agendize for next meeting. Because of our limited time, we have to determine, in order to post for the input hearings, because we won't be meeting again, we need to determine the time for at least technically until April 28th, all those meetings, but probably we should just finish out April, because we will not have another meeting time to determine the input hearing times, so we need to have those agendized for public posting.
Can we leave that to the staff to do?
We would need you to approve them. How about if, while you take the break, we figure the times, and then you can approve them after a break?
Please, and then can we come back also with the motion for the delegated authority so that we can do some of these things in between of this nature going forward?
And then just one other, do we need to vote on this at least through June? And we could do that with the time. I'm assuming it would be a combined motion, at least April through June? Because was the committee looking for that?
We are
I thought it was an
looking
action
for an action
Vote on
item.
that. Okay, so we'll do that with the times? So now that